Thank you very much indeed, and I hope you can hear me okay. You'll be pleased to know I have my sneakers on so I can keep running around as I run out of time in my speech today. So I'm here to be extremely passionate about all things biotechnology as a critical technology within Europe. I'm going to talk very briefly today. I'm going to talk about ourselves a little bit so you know what we do for you at European level. We're going to talk about biotech as a critical technology, which is a conversation that Europe doesn't have enough. We will also look at it in context. We are not the only players in this game. This is a global game, and it is a race that is being run very fast. And then I'm going to get onto the really exciting stuff, which is I know why you got into biotech, to talk about legislation and how important it is for you. And then we'll look at how that looks like for you in real life through a really great game, and it'll be really exciting, I can guarantee. And then we're going to look ahead. What is Europe doing to make sure that biotechnology can achieve its full economic and societal potential? It's been around for decades and decades and decades, but now things are really accelerating. And also, finally, the role that you play, not only as amazing scientists and early-stage entrepreneurs, but as the champions and keepers of biotechnology at the highest legislative level, talking to governments at all levels to make sure that your science can be developed into impactful products and processes. So I will talk very quickly about who EuropaBio is. We are a non-profit industry association that represents biotechnology across all sectors. It is our job to champion biotech, amazing science, so that it can turn into products that earn you money and allow Europe to grow for resilience and strategic autonomy. We have three main goals in life. We help build the right legislative and regulatory frameworks so that amazing science can progress through to products that people will be able to access. Because no matter how great your science is, until somebody buys it from you, you do not have a product. So the game is just started when you finish your amazing and scientific invention. We also make sure that people can see biotechnology. It's incredibly important that people understand what it does as part of all of their everyday lives and across all of the sectors in which they operate. It is everywhere in increasing amounts, and it's very important that people see it. And finally, as we really heard as well, we help build the environment in which biotech can grow. Let's say you have the right science, you have the right legislation, you need the people, you need the capacity, you need the investment, you need the ability to export, you need the huge power of the single market within Europe. So we work to help build all of these things because science is so important to be delivered to its destination. And how do we do this? We have three main engines of activity within EuropaBio. We have a Healthcare Biotechnology Council, which really looks at where the next generation cell and gene therapies are, how you use substances of human origin within your research and your products, how you make sure that biotechnology really reaches those diseases that conventional medicines do not reach. We have an Industrial Biotechnology Council, which is so huge. It covers all sectors because industrial biotechnology is revolutionizing manufacturing across sectors. It is such an enabling technology, and I will talk about it a little bit more later, and you will also have a presentation later that talks about its application into food. And finally, we have a National Associations Council, because who does all the work? It's the member states within the European Union. So you are the guys that have the science, that create the businesses, that enact the legislation, that help build the skills, that help build the investors. The national associations and the countries across Europe are the engines of prosperity from biotechnology. And this is supported through an SME platform, because small companies have unique needs and unique voices. What is a 20-year strategic decision for a large company is a 6-month existential crisis for a small company because you have that cash flow. You do not have a 20-year cash flow. And finally, we have a biomanufacturing platform which crosses all sectors because it's incredibly important to help other people understand what biomanufacturing and biotechnology looks like from the product back, not just the technology forward. So this is the kind of work we do. I'd like to introduce you to Max. Max is a recent addition to the EuropaBio team, and Max helps us to explain what science does and what microorganisms in particular can do as engines of an almost infinite variety of different products. So Max, you can find Max on our website, and they will be using examples of how biotechnology works in multiple applications and what the products that come from that look like. So who is our community within EuropaBio? We work across all stakeholders within EuropaBio, industrial and non-profit and public. We have an amazing heart of corporate members who are the companies that are producing the innovative products and processes that drive economic development within Europe. And these cross all sectors. We have big pharma, small pharma, we have precision fermentation, we have biofuels. All of these companies help us shape what biotechnology needs to address in Europe. We have an amazing set of national associations, and we're incredibly proud to add the Biocatalyst Foundation into that number as well, which is why I'm standing here talking to you today. They are members and partners, and through their participation within EuropaBio, we represent you on the European stage. And finally, we have the expert companies, and we have our precious small companies. These are the people that make everything work. Large companies eventually come from SMEs, and it is SMEs that are taking the risk and the almost impossible burden to bring novel disruptive technologies into existence for industrial development. So we have a very broad community. And so we talk a little bit more about biotech itself. Biotechnology has been around for decades, as you know, but really recently, the full understanding of its role as a critical technology is coming into focus. This is not just about biotech as an extension of pharmaceuticals, biotech as an extension of food manufacture. Biotechnology itself is a critical technology, and the definition of a critical technology is one that enhances or poses a risk to the national interest. It sits there with AI, sits there with quantum computing, sits there with sort of microchips. And it's incredibly important that we start from that conversation. It is not about if Europe makes the most of biotechnology, it's how it makes the most of biotechnology, because this is something that all regions in the world are building up. And this is a global game, and it's a global race, as I've already said. And it's very good to see increasing strategic and political focus being given to biotechnology, not just as the next jazzy product for something, but a vital technology in which we need to have the capacity, the skills, and the local resilience to be able to compete globally. And I don't need to tell you that there are very significant geopolitical and climate change pressures on our supply chains, on our ability to address pandemics, on our ability to provide sufficient food, and also to not only to mitigate the effects of climate change, but also to try and reverse the effects of climate change. And even without these things, biotechnology would be playing a major role because it is a next generation technology. You are more competitive when you integrate biotechnology into your industrial process. So this is something that the whole world is doing right now. And biotechnology is often spoken about as a potential, enabling, but it's here now with a massive economic footprint within Europe. It's often hidden inside sectors, and it's quite difficult to measure. So you can't just measure healthcare, you've got to measure biotechnology within healthcare. It's not just food manufacturing, you have to measure biotechnology within food manufacturing. And EuropaBio has been working with the WIFO Institute in Germany to understand what the economic footprint of biotechnology looks like. And the numbers are very impressive, and they will only grow. So for example, when we look at gross value added, which is the difference in value between a product when it comes into a company and when it comes out of a company, biotechnology wildly outperforms the EU average in terms of growth of gross value added. So everything we do in biotechnology has a very high rate of increase in the value that you bring to your product or process. This is a significant part of Europe's economic growth. Employment, we've already talked about the skills challenge, but since 2008, the employment growth within biotechnology has gone up by 700%. And it is 7 times higher than the EU average for a sector. So it's incredibly important as an employer and as a place in which to develop skills. It is 7 times as high as the EU average. And finally, exports. And these numbers are changing all the time. Europe is a big exporter of biotechnology-based products. And you will see here that it is looking at its 8.3% growth rate in terms of exports compared to an EU average of 4.9%. This is generating value all the time. And it is incredibly important that we enable it to do it more. Because we are, as I said before, we are not the only players in this game. There are large, fast-moving players elsewhere globally. And so we can talk about that a little bit now. We are at a point now where different regions of the world are looking to establish themselves as controlling supply chains, controlling access to technology through biotechnology. You've seen it with the vaccines race, you see it with food production, you see it with energy production. We talk now, there are many examples where Europe goes, how do we make our supply chains more resilient? And they'll look and say, oh, this active pharmaceutical ingredient is only produced in one factory in India or one factory in China. So we already don't control that supply chain. And so with the transition to biomanufacturing, we have an opportunity to become more masters of our own destiny, a little bit more in terms of what is manufactured and where. Because we're not going to manufacture everything in Europe, but what we need to do is have enough skin in the game as a global player to make sure that supply chains stay open, especially when we need them in times of crisis. So this is, and all regions around the world are highly aware of this. The country that becomes dominant in terms of, let's say, vitamins manufacturing through biomanufacturing will control that particular supply chain. And I can tell you already, the vitamins have pretty much left Europe. It's incredibly important that we diversify and build our own strength in terms of how we manufacture key components of our supply chains. So just under 2 years ago, the US launched an enormous project called the US Executive Order for Biotech and Biomanufacturing. And this was really recognizing that it needed much more biomanufacturing. So it's almost 2 years into a program of streamlining regulatory processes, making sure there's sufficient investment, attracting more companies to the US for biomanufacturing. And it supported that with the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a massive fiscal incentive to go and invest in the US. And it is working. Lots of companies are taking manufacturing to the US. Europe needs to address this and use the tools that it has to make sure that companies will invest here to grow. And the US is not the only one. China and India are huge manufacturers, as we know. They are making the transition into biomanufacturing. And they are so big that if they become established and consolidated as leading biomanufacturers, it's very hard for Europe to be competitive. But we have huge potential now. As a critical technology, biotechnology is probably the best one for Europe to focus on because it's already so well established. We have amazing R&D. We actually have more biomanufacturing capacity than many other regions in the world. So we actually have a head start in this from many of the critical foundation points. So it's incredibly important that we move quickly to scale and become that global player. So I get to the bit of particularly why EuropaBio is in business now. We talk about legislation because it really matters as to why or how your biotechnology science will progress through to market. And it's not a very jazzy topic to try and sell people. You know, legislation is far away from the bench. However, it entirely dictates what will happen to your science. So when you have an innovative product or an innovative process, it is the legislation of the sector into which it is targeted that will dictate if it gets to market, how it gets to market, how long it will take to get to market. Because as I said at the beginning, you don't have a product until somebody has bought it from you. It is the circuitry that links the bench to the market, and it's incredibly important. And it's also built by the people that represent you. The European Commission, it generates legislative proposals, but it is countries, it is your MEPs, and it is your government that decides what that looks like by the time it reaches a final legislative pathway. The European Parliament and the European Union will create the legislation that dictates the fate of your science. And you should be part of the conversation with your policymakers so that they can understand what that legislation has to look like. So it's not just what it looks like, it's how it's implemented. It is implemented in 27 different member states. And often, it is the same piece of legislation can look wildly different by the time it has been implemented at national level. So for many sectors, there is in fact not a single market in Europe. There are 27 different markets because each country has a slightly different way of implementing legislation. And your voices as innovators should be reaching up to your governments and saying, allow us to harness the full strength of the single market, standardize how we do things, make it easier. Don't have slow national permitting. Make it faster. Make it easy for me to get an export license for something. There are many things that exist on national and EU level, and EuropaBio is really here to help you bring that voice to your governments. And legislation for innovation has a key role. It needs to enable the protection of the knowledge that you have generated. If you cannot protect it, you do not have anything to sell. It needs to ensure that your technology can go to market as quickly as possible, obviously within the safety criteria that we need to have within Europe, and in which creates a high brand value for Europe. Legislation needs to provide clarity and certainty. The more times you say, I don't know, to an investor, the less likely they are to give you any money. And they're certainly not going to give you a lot of money. So if you can't tell them how long it will take, if you can't tell them what a decision will hinge on, they're less likely to give you money. Legislation creates this. And finally, it really helps to empower the European Union single market. And that is a huge single market. It's the largest one globally. And we don't use it well enough, particularly for biotechnology, because it can be fragmented across so many different countries. So I just tried to summarize this in a fantastic piece of smart art. You can tell I'm an amazingly talented slide writer. So at the center, you have your legislation. It tells you how much protection your innovation has, and it tells you how it's going to get to market. And the better this is for your science, the greater the initial value that your potential research has. It's not the final product, it's not the final price of the product, it is how attractive this is to develop through an industrial pathway. So the better it is, the more investment you're going to get, the faster you're going to be able to progress, the more partners you will be able to develop. You will be able to work globally with incredible partners if your innovation is attractive for development. You will get to market quickly, you will be able to build capacity, so you will have money to invest in structures and people, and with that creates the gravitational pull of a strong biotechnology hub. You know what strong biotech hubs look like. You have Cambridge in the UK, in the US. You have France is a powerful hub now. You've got lots of different biotech hubs, and they have their own gravitational pull. And it's incredibly important to help build the critical mass. And you do that through having technologies and potential products that have value through the strength of legislation. So I'm going to give you two quick examples now. The general pharmaceutical legislation is on fire right now. This will tell you what your route to market is for novel medicines for the next 20 years. It is a huge piece of legislation. It has been coming for the last 6 years, and we have just started the process now. It will tell you how long your products are protected for, which gives you your initial value of your research. It will tell you what your pathway to approval is. At the moment, we've got the really exciting opportunity to have regulatory sandboxes, which is perfect for biotechnology because that provides a pathway for novel technologies through the regulatory pathway where no existing framework is there. It's a great way to accelerate innovation into patients. And the legislation will also tell you how fast your product is going to get to market. We have the Commission at the moment has a really great opportunity to try and accelerate the timescale to market, to try and make Europe more competitive with the US. But what we also have, and as I woke up this morning to hear, is that the Latvian Ministry of Health is backing a reduced level of innovation protection. That was literally the headline in Politico today, which means that you will have less time to make your money back before your data can be used to produce generics and biosimilars, which immediately reduces the value of your innovation at day one. And it's incredibly important that the landscape has innovators, generics, biosimilars, all in it. This is part of what healthcare looks like. But if you don't have the innovative product, you can't have generics or biosimilars. And this is the really important balance to strike. We also have a very important piece of legislation right now on new genomic techniques, specifically applied into plants. This is an amazing advance for Europe, because Europe has been incredibly precautionary when it comes to GM technology. I am old enough to remember when the whole Monsanto thing blew when I was finishing my PhD, and it changed the landscape of plant research in Europe, and not in a good way. But now we have a proposal on the table that really embraces how we can use CRISPR and other technologies to accelerate European research and products in plants. And it's incredibly important. It will make a huge difference. However, it also at the same time tells you that you cannot patent a plant that is produced through a GM technique, which kind of eliminates the value of your innovation right at the beginning, because you can do it, but you cannot get a patent on it, which means you cannot sell it. So we're going to play a really quick game of snakes and ladders. I understand this is a game that exists in various forms all over Europe. I did some testing in the office, but basically this is, you roll your dice, you either go up a ladder or down a snake. And I've got 3 little examples to use. So your amazing technologies, you have a breakthrough treatment for a rare disease that has had 20 years of funding go into it to get to the point where you can go, I think we can go to clinical trials with this. We've got a CRISPR-edited plant that could produce malaria vaccines. And this is a real-life example. One of our members produces vaccines through plants, and it is an amazing technology. And finally, you have a novel microorganism that can produce a food ingredient where it was only available before through one company, not in Europe, using a very polluting petrochemical-derived manufacturing process. So let's look at what we could do. So we roll the dice for our breakthrough in your rare disease, and that's amazing. You can go straight up the first ladder because you have your orphan designation, which gives you protection against competition in the market. However, we roll the dice again, and you have the snake, which says your period of orphan designation has now been drastically reduced, which is what is on the table in the current GPL, which means that it expires before you can finish your clinical trials, which means that you don't get that next round of investment, and your large company partner goes to the US to partner with somebody else. This is how it works. When you run out of protection for your product, it has nowhere else to go. Your CRISPR-edited plant that's also amazing. You've been able to generate something that is going to change the way you manufacture. You can manufacture here, you could manufacture in Africa. You can take your manufacturing to where the need is. And that takes you up a huge ladder. However, the snake is, of course, that you have no patent protection for this plant at all in Europe. So you can't even start to produce, to gain the investment, to do the trials, to find your industry partners. And finally, your microorganism for a key food ingredient. This is great. It can go into people feed. It can go into animal feed. This is going to help Europe stabilize key components of its food supply chain. And the great news, you go straight up that ladder. You could get a European Innovation Council grant to help you scale up your technology. Another ladder, you can find there's a pilot plant to produce the batch scales you need to go and get approval from EFSA for this. And then you get to the snake, which is the fact that there's a 2-year wait to get into that pilot plant. There is another ladder that says it takes too long to get approval from EFSA, and so your competitor in the US got there first. And then the final snake is that the taxonomy rules within Europe tell you that you cannot use sugar as a source and be considered sustainable. So you cannot gain investment, sustainability investment, to build your pilot plant. These are all the things that legislation creates and that you, as the champions of technology, have the opportunity to help change and make better. Europe is waking up to what biomanufacturing and biotechnology as a critical technology has to do. You may be aware that earlier this year there was a Biotech and biomanufacturing initiative launched, which we are really happy to see, because for the first time it acknowledges the major bottlenecks that biotechnology exists to take wonderful technologies into viable products and processes on the market globally. And EuropaBio is a big fan of this. This will help us address the regulatory bottlenecks. It will help us address access to finance. It will help accelerate local, complex, tedious permitting and export license challenges that exist all across Europe. So we have big hopes for this, and Europe needs to take this step now. So this is where you come in. You are the keepers of your innovation, and you are the voices that help explain to your members of the European Parliament, to your national government, what your innovation needs to progress. It sure as hell doesn't need 6 years of regulatory data protection in novel medicines. It needs 8, which is what it used to be. So you need to go and talk to your governments and say, what are you doing? If you want a biotech hub, this is what you need to do. Because Latvia is involved in the generation of the legislation, its progression, and its approval. And because you have MEPs and a national government, talk to them. Help them understand what it needs and how you do it. EuropaBio and the Biocatalyst Foundation are here to provide you with all the information that you need, to bring your voices to Brussels, to bring your voices to your MEPs, to help shape the discussion at national level. Because this is what we're here to do. We help you create the pathway for your technology through to its application. And we are all champions of our technology. So I will say, we work in partnership with the Biocatalyst Foundation. We're incredibly proud to have them as members. And I see our host inching towards the stage. So I'll just go this way a bit. You are the voice for the correct legislation for your amazing technology. It's like sending your kids to school. It's like, you want them to go to the right school. You will be on parent-teacher councils. You will go to parents' evenings. This is what it's like to develop the legislation through which your science will grow. So, with EuropaBio, bring your science. Tell us what it is. Explain what your science needs to progress. Help build the legislation in which it will progress and deliver your innovation to market and to people and to our food plates and our environment. So I say, thank you very much. Come and find me. I would be delighted to hear about all of your science and help explain how we can build it up at European level. So thank you very much indeed.